I mean, I'm already recording this, so we're
All
off to the
right.
races already. So I have had so many people want to know how it's going.
Yeah.
I mean, you started this adventure a little over a year ago, right? A year and a half ago now at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
And I mean, just by way of introduction, introduce yourself one time for people that didn't actually see the original episode, and then I'm going to put a link back in for everybody. It's like, oh, I got to go back and check this out because I interviewed Lisa prior to her. You were in the process of selling everything that you own,
Yeah.
and building out your van and heading off on adventures unknown. And
Right.
then you got out there, and then COVID hit. So let's start at the top. Introduce yourself, and then we're just gonna jump into it.
That works. Hi, everybody. Lisa Bussett. As Steve said, been in the van for about a year and a half. Our last conversation was me sitting in a half-emptied house, getting it ready for selling. So, very different emotional state now
Yeah,
than
yeah,
I
yeah.
was then. Um, but yeah, so it all, jumped in and everything, the timing of everything was perfect.
Yep.
And so many people question if I did this because of COVID. And I'm like, nope, it just, the divine intervention worked and got me out there before it all hit.
Well, and
So,
the cool thing, and I'm actually going to showcase your website. So everybody that
okay.
is seeing this episode will be able to see that lisabussett.com. This is where you're basically providing everybody a snapshot into the life that you have living out there on the road in the wilderness, if you will. You've gone through so many states at this state. Yeah, at this point,
Yeah.
you've experienced so many things, and I'm anxious to kind of get everybody kind of an update. First, why did you do it? Second, what did the COVID situation, that seems to be a kind of a continual question I get from folks. Like,
Yeah.
did that upend your trip or your plans? And what I have told people is like, well, I think you had some destinations in mind. You set off to do some things, but I never got the impression that it really messed with your desire or your original plan at all. So, but
Yeah.
I mean, you're living it. So, tell me if I'm accurate in that case.
Yeah, no. Well, first off, I'm horrible about updating my website, so you can sign up there and get automatic newsletters. Like anytime I
Yep.
do post, they'll just automatically go to you. And I don't post often, so you're not going to get annoyed by me. Um, Instagram is usually my main
That's your
place because
go-to.
it's
Yep.
yeah, and I'm on Facebook too, but mostly that's just me sharing whatever I put on Instagram to
Yep.
Facebook. So but
And
anyway,
I
so
love the title of the site. It's called Vanventures with Lisa and Paco, and Paco
yeah.
is your
He's my
dog.
dog. Yeah. It's funny how many people think he's my partner. I guess he technically is, but of the four-legged variety. He's
Yep.
asleep next to me now. Um,
Nice.
he's a good buddy.
Yep.
But yeah,
So
so
what motivated you to do this? When we talked originally, it was something that you had kind of thought about for a long time, and then you kind of
yeah.
set out. But just give people just a sense of a background of kind of what you were doing before and where this adventure has taken you since.
Yeah, so what motivated me? Like Steve said, and if you listen to the old podcast, I kind of go into it more in depth, but it was an idea I had about now probably 14 years ago. And back then, I had a different dog, different car, and I listened to outside voices and influences and, believed that it was a crazy idea and didn't have the guts to do it.
Yeah.
And so fast forward all those years, and, it probably is better that I didn't do it then because I've learned a lot between, had a lot of skills in between those two periods.
Yeah.
Anyway, so my neighbor was selling her van and this van, and it just kind of seemed like serendipity. So bought it, built it out, took it out for its first run, and took a month off and kind of trial ran it after I built it out. And I turned 40 during that time, and not that I didn't. It's not to do with my 40th birthday. It was just kind of one of those.
Timing.
It's like, yeah, it just happened, and then I drove back to Austin, and it just like fell right back into that hamster wheel
Yeah.
and rush hour traffic, and it was just, I don't know, something deep inside me was like something has to change.
Yeah.
It's either now or never. Like, I didn't have any strings other than a house. It's like didn't really have any ties to Austin that I couldn't leave, and So anyway, so I decided it took me about 6 months to get brave enough to make that leap, and then I did, and put my house on the market, sold all my stuff,
Yeah.
gave my other car to my niece, and here I am.
Here you are. So right
Yeah,
now, where are you?
I'm in Washington State.
Okay.
Last year I didn't get up here because of all the wildfires.
Yeah.
So been taking my time. We spent about 2 weeks up in the Olympic Peninsula, just finished with Mount Rainier. So just a little north of Mount Rainier now. So
Nice. Well,
yeah.
and the pictures that you took from up there were just absolutely stunning. The one the other night
Yeah.
was just that you
Yeah.
were like, hey, I kind of lucked out on a camp spot right by the water, and
Yeah.
I mean the water was just beautiful. I'm like,
It
oh,
was,
I
I know.
I along with everybody that has been following this journey is I think everybody is just super jealous right now because
Yeah.
you're seeing parts of the country that I don't think people ever get an opportunity to do because on vacation,
Right.
you have to get there and then it's like trying to cram a bunch of stuff in between. And these
Mhm.
places you really seem to, at least from what I've followed on your Instagram and your occasional posts on the website, is you're sort of letting the trip kind of unfold as it goes. There's no end date. There's no pressure to
Right.
get back. There's no deadlines that are pending. So you kind of get to allow the space to sort of welcome you in and kind of introduce itself, at its
Yeah.
own pace, right?
Right. Yeah, I like to travel slowly, you know. I mean, some of that's the van. It doesn't move too fast up the mountains anyway, but otherwise, I find it's more stressful if I'm moving every day. And
hmm
even if we find a campsite and, there's nothing exciting around there,
Yeah.
Paco and I go on hikes all over the place, down forest roads are just as exciting as and beautiful
Yeah.
as, parks. And a lot of the times it's funny, I met a woman yesterday who is also in a van, and we were talking about how often outside of the national parks are just as beautiful.
Yeah.
So, sometimes you can go on these hikes. Like when I was over by the Hoh Rainforest, I camped outside of the park and we had the whole rainforest to ourselves.
Yeah.
It's like we could just walk
Wow.
through we stayed there over a long weekend, and it's like, you can't beat that. And then you go in the
No.
park and you're just like, wall to wall with people
People,
going, trying
yep.
to look at everything and take selfies and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, you're like,
I,
this is
I
why I left
prefer out in the
civilization.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Not anti people, but it's just
Sure.
the crowds, even without COVID, it's
Yeah.
you can't appreciate it when everybody's crammed in and, vying for the same photograph.
Yeah, we went
So
to Zion and Bryce Canyon this
mhm.
past summer, back in July, and fortunately, it wasn't like super crazy busy. We got up early, got our hiking done before the crowds came in. But at the end of the day, it's just that icky, too many people trying to do too much, and
Yeah.
and you've got all these folks, just focused on the photo experience, because everybody's
Right.
got a camera in their hand and instead of just like enjoying where you're at and what you're doing, and so I thought of you
Yeah.
a number of times on that trip because I was just like, ours has a definitive end, and I feel like we're a little bit rushed on certain things. So you feel like you can't really take the time that I think you're
Yeah.
getting to do. So it makes me super envious. But that whole crowded park thing, I could understand the appeal of doing kind of the opposite and going out on, kind of parts that, the typical tourist isn't going to go see.
Right. Yeah. And most of the places I just sit. People always ask, "What do you do?" And I've met so many other campers and van lifers who, are like extreme
Yeah.
sports folks doing, mountain biking, rock climbing, all that. And that's great. And me, like I love just to sit and stare at trees,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the rocks. Like we go on walks and it's just I'm so mesmerized by the various colors of rocks, and Paco just sits and waits for me, when I stop to stare at something for too long. But you really, I mean, that's when you start to appreciate it more. And even
Yeah.
when we're camped in the same place for, a week, you go on the same walks and you see something new every time. And
Absolutely.
you kind of allow the environment to unfold for you.
So
So
do you find that in fact, actually, I've got a list of questions that have come to
ask
me
away.
from different people, but one of the things that I kind of appreciated, we took a couple of hikes when we were on our summer vacation, but doing the same hike at different times of the day allowed
Hmm.
completely different perspectives. So are you, when you're doing that, are you kind of enjoying that process as well, so that you're kind of, you're experiencing it in the morning and midday and evening, and or come back on a day that, it's less clouds or more clouds or whatever, and just kind of, it's like a whole different adventure, I would imagine.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the good thing about Paco is, he forces me to get out. He's
Hmm.
a weird little dog. He won't go to the restroom around the van. So, like,
That's
even
good, I guess, right?
that's what people say, but it's like sometimes I just want to open the door and,
Yeah,
he'll
just
go
take
do his
off, go do
business.
it, come back.
Yeah, but so we do have to go for walks, in the morning and various times, which I don't mind, obviously. But yeah, it is interesting. I love watching the sun move through trees and
Yeah,
across the environment, and it is interesting to see, different times of the day get different light, and like you said, the clouds, and I love the cloud shadows. Those just I could watch those all day. Like in Montana, when you just see the, giant clouds crossing and
yeah.
chase their shadows across the landscape. So
That is,
yes,
that's
that
got to be awesome. So
it
let me
is.
ask you. So, obviously one of the things that you did outside of your busy, kind of 9 to 5 life when you had it, right, was you were also working on your art. And I know that, when you and
Yeah.
I talked initially before the trip, you were like, I'm going to take some stuff and I'm going to leave some stuff back at my parents' house and come back to it later if I want to. But how has this entire trip influenced your art going forward? Are you still in it? Or are you just like, hey, I got too much to experience out here and I'll eventually go
No,
back to it? Or what's it done for you?
it's a timely question. I just if you look at my Instagram post, no, no, when I was in Montana, so you're right. I when I got into the van, I just brought a few like more craft
Yeah,
supplies
yeah,
than art, and I needed a break from art. It stopped being fun for me, and
yeah,
I was just
yeah.
doing a lot of things that, you know, I don't know if I was trying to force it to be something that wasn't, or I just kind of got wrapped up in too many things, mentally, and um, so I needed it to. Like, I always joke that I needed a sabbatical from my art, where most
Yeah.
people go on sabbatical to focus on their art, but Um, so yeah, so then about 6 months or maybe 8 months in, I picked up some acrylic paints, which I hadn't used forever. I'm an oil paint artist, and
Oh, nice.
those kind of drove me crazy. They were more
Really?
frustrating than they were fun, just because it was so long since I'd used them. And then when I was in Montana, I was staring at these rocks that were just every color of the rainbow and amazing, and that kind of was my epiphany of, there is no reason why I can't, like, all the reasons and excuses I thought that I couldn't bring my oil paints,
Yeah.
like, either didn't exist anymore, or were, I realized that I just made them up, just put up blocks on my own. um so I called my mom. My whole paint cabinet was at their house, and she pulled out every tube of paint, photographed it, and I marked up which ones to send me, and she sent them to me. And then I ordered some panels and things and had them all shipped. So I've started painting again, and you can see some of my pictures. Yeah, they're
Yeah, I'm pulling
right
it
now.
up
Just
because
yeah,
I'm not
the
logged
one
into
right in the.
Instagram. I can't actually click
Oh
any of the
yeah,
photos or it'll log me
yeah,
out. But I'm gonna try and showcase this as best as I can just to give you kind
yeah.
of everybody a perspective. So there's your paints,
Yep,
and
that's a
then
little
this.
video showing, and that's yeah. I've been doing. Well, I guess you saw. I think you bought some of my other
Hmm.
small
Yeah.
ones. Those, when I had started them before, were just an outlet to have fun again, and so I'm kind of using the same panels and trying
Oh,
to just silence my inner critic. And
yeah.
it's not about really creating any masterpieces right now. It's just getting back in touch with art, and the smell of the oil paint. I just love it. And so the only downside, and this is where I'm starting to get like itchy feet of, wishing I had a dedicated studio space, is it's great to paint outside. I'm not a plein air painter by any means, but it's nice to paint outside. And then at the same time, I'm learning how paints react in 100-degree weather, or in
Yeah.
a rainforest, or when I was in Washington, east of here, uh, ashes started falling into my paints. Oh yeah,
Oh,
those are my older
really?
paintings. Yeah, there were wildfires nearby, and the ash was so thick falling that, like, it took me longer to get my paint set up and everything than I than I was able to even paint. So
Well,
it's those, I'm okay with those being my big problems that I have to deal with,
it
you
changes
know,
it
but
changes the experience. Yeah.
it
Well,
does. Yeah.
so for those of you that are seeing this on video, it'll be, we're actually going to have this premiere here in a few weeks, Lisa, just so you know. But
Okay.
this is what I have on screen. For those of you that are hearing it from the podcast, you'll definitely want to go to my YouTube channel so that you can see Lisa and some of what we're showing on screen. But this is the work that you showcase on your website, and these
Right.
are some of the ones. This is how I got to know you, is through these
Yeah.
paintings, and then the small media that you were talking about.
I don't even
Really
have
just
them on
becomes a
there.
great opportunity. What's that?
I said I don't even have those on my website,
Yeah, but
but
yeah, I mean, I've seen it. I can vouch for it. She is,
yeah.
I mean, all of your artwork is just, it's absolutely incredible. I mean, you're just such
Thanks.
a gifted artist, but I can't wait to see what some of these new things unfold. Like, that one
Yeah.
picture with the trees is obviously one that was inspired by being out there, right?
Yeah. Most of the small ones I'm working on now are all landscapes, or some version, not realistic landscapes by any means, but
So,
definitely influenced by it.
So ultimately, the answer to that one question was it really has stimulated a new set of creativity for
Yeah.
you, then, right? I mean, at the end of the
Yeah.
day, and now you're testing out mediums. And I remember you talking about that. You're like, I'm going to take some things, I'm going to get back to my pencils, I'm going to get back to kind of drawing and just kind of see where that goes. Then obviously coming
Yeah.
back to this type of paint, where your mom could send that to you so that you now have
Yeah.
it. It's was that something that happened kind of over a gradual period of time, or was it pretty much once you got out there and saw this great inspirational, scenery? Was it like boom, instantly the creative juices just start flowing?
I think it probably a little of both. I think, my creative spark and that love never died,
Yeah.
and I've taken literally, I think I'm at like 14,000 photographs, which is
Wow.
crazy. But as an artist, most of them are like your general shots or just like up close of a rock, or, a lot of textures and colors. So my photographs in my mind went from just taking pictures to remember where I was to, oh, this is going to be great as a painting. And
Yep.
then it just kind of bubbled and bubbled until it was something that I couldn't ignore anymore. And thought, why not? I'm the only one holding myself back. So
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. So I have another friend, Christine, who has followed your adventure with great interest because she at one point wants to do this.
yeah.
And one question that she had, because she has done some side trip adventures, I think, kind of like
Hmm.
testing the waters like you did.
Yeah.
Are you taking the pictures that you put up on Instagram? Are you doing that on your phone, or do you have a particular camera? And if so, what kind of camera is it?
I just use my phone, which is lazy response, like sometimes you get
But
out
it's
there and
there. I
you're,
mean, it's
yeah, I
easy
know,
and it's
yeah.
portable.
And it's so lightweight. I do have a big DSLR that could take, really high res nice photographs, and it just lives in the van.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I just use my phone. I have thought about buying a little point and shoot or
Uh-huh.
something small to bring, but I mean, so far my phone has done me well, and I have it so it's, everything automatically goes up to the cloud
Sure.
when I
Yeah.
have a signal, so that way, because I get
It's
the
saved and
constant,
preserved. Yep.
yeah, I get the constant message on my phone that my data, or my storage is maxed out, so I have to go wipe things out.
Well,
But
she'll definitely want me to ask what type of phone is it? Is it an Apple? Is it a,
it's
Google,
a
Android?
Android
Okay.
what do I have? Galaxy S9.
Okay. S9.
So
Yeah, because
yeah,
the quality of the pictures that you're taking are amazing. So,
yeah. When I had to get a new phone, this one I'd read about. I've always been an Android person, and
mhm.
don't hate me, iPhone people. But when this one came out, it was all hyped up for the camera, so I
Yeah.
waited for it to come out, and it's done well so far.
That's great. Yeah,
So
and like you said, I mean, it makes like perfect sense. She'll probably want me to ask just in follow up though for the DLSR or DSLR or DLSR.
DSLR,
Yeah, DLSR.
yeah.
What camera do you use for that?
What do I have? Sony Rebel.
Okay.
I forget what the actual. I can pull it out.
Yeah. No, no, no. It's
I
fine.
forget what
Yeah.
the I want to say it's a T6i. It's been a while since I've looked at it.
Okay. Are you sure it's a Sony
So,
then? Because a T6i is a Canon.
oh, Canon. Yep.
Y-
Sorry. It is Canon.
Okay. And
See,
believe it or
tells you
not,
how often I've used it.
that's what I'm using right now to
Oh
film
yeah,
this.
yeah. Hey,
It's a good camera, but man, you're
it
right.
is.
It's bulky and it's heavy and
It's
it's
heavy.
awkward and
I even
not
bought like
nearly as
clips
easy
so
as
I
the.
could put it on my backpack, and
Yeah,
it's just like you just kind of
yeah.
lean forward with it. So
I'm with you. And with the way that these phones are now and the quality that you're getting, I mean, they're just as good, right?
yeah,
So, why not continue to use it? Plus, anytime you're hiking, if you can save yourself some, aggravation with the bulkiness or the weight, go
yeah.
for it.
It's so much easier to just whip your phone out and
Yeah, yeah.
take
So,
photo or video or.
so my buddy Tim is actually up in your neck of the woods, but he is,
Oh yeah.
where you're at right now. He actually is in Washington State. But one of the questions he had asked is, have you had any wildlife encounters? And I know you had one or a couple I saw, but any that were concerning or more just from a safe, respectable television distance?
um, well, every day feels like you're watching the Nature Channel in 3D. I mean,
Really?
it's remarkable. And I'm like, I have a dog, and he'll chase squirrels and stuff, but for the most part, we're pretty quiet, And
Yeah.
so when I'm out in the campsite and we've been there for a while, deer will come up and just, hang out next to the van. And you can see on the Instagram, like,
Yeah.
and I guess on my website, in Idaho, a moose she just stayed at our camp with us.
I
She would
saw
come
that.
through. Yeah, it was crazy. Of course, moose are not friendly. So I have total respect for wildlife. And so every time she would show up in camp, we would move the other direction. There she is. But I mean,
Wow.
she would come like 50 yards from us, and at night she would bed down like right behind the van. And
No kidding.
so I know. So it's like, okay, guess we're going to bed now.
Yeah.
But
I mean, it's kind of like
but
that. The moose was kind of watching out for you guys, right? To a
yeah,
certain
yeah,
degree.
it was a really special moment actually. That was my first. I'd seen a lot of moose out, but she was my first close one like that. And then right above there, you can see the little baby bear
Yeah.
that came through. I guess we were in Montana around the
Oh,
4th of July, and that little bear ran through, and Paco was the one to alert me to that first. Paco has like a little wolf that he makes that is the
uh-huh.
indicator that something is afoot,
Yeah. You know the
And so
difference, right? Yeah.
yeah, so he made that noise, and then he jumped in the van, and I looked out and I was like, oh, bear. And it was a small one, so I immediately thought like mama bear,
Ooh.
So we closed everything up, and it was just, I think it was a yearling, so because mama never came along, so I think it was just a little bear on his own.
Well, that's
um
good. I mean, that's
but
fortunate, right?
yeah,
Oh,
but then and I didn't put this anywhere on Instagram, so this is exclusive news that
oh,
only
sweet.
friends and
All right.
family know. That also in Montana, last year we went all through, and never only saw bears in parks, where you
Yeah.
expect to see bears, but we've stayed in some pretty remote places in Montana that grizzlies should have just been crawling all over us, but thankfully they didn't. But anyway, this year we were parked by a river, and we were literally like 12 steps from this river, and I had the awning set up, and it was a great spot. I thought we're going to stay here for a few days,
Excuse me.
And the next morning, I'm asleep. It's like 5:30 in the morning, and I hear this noise, and I start waking up, and I think it's just Paco, 'cause
Yeah.
sometimes he has dreams and kicks the cabinets and stuff. And then I hear it again, and kind of this slow wake up, and then Paco did a like half yelp, half bark,
Mm-hmm.
and so I shot up and woke up, and I could hear movement or something up front. And so my passenger seat is permanently spun around, so it faces
Mm-hmm.
the back of the van. So I crawled into that, and I looked over the visor in the front windshield, and didn't see anything. So I thought, well, that's weird. I could have sworn it was coming from up here.
Was it still
And mind
dark?
you, I'm like still, no, it's kind of dim daylight.
Yeah.
Up there, it would get daylight at like 4:30, and it
Excuse
wouldn't
me.
get dark until about 11 at that time. But anyway, so yeah, it was just kind of that dewy morning light.
Yeah.
So I'm staring out the front, and I don't see anything. And then like my window's like right here, and I hear this noise, and so I pulled back my curtain, and there's a bear right there, and he was standing up, and I just saw its chest. So I reach over. The weird thing is, I wasn't even afraid. Like, and I just reached over and honked my horn that sounded like the Roadrunner. It was like meh, meh. It was so sad, and I thought, oh man, that's not gonna scare anybody. And for whatever reason, like Paco's like freaking out back in the back of the
Yeah.
van by this point. For whatever reason, I'm just staring at the bear, and all I said was, "Hey, get out of here!" Like that tone,
Yeah.
not even
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah.
And he just dropped down, looked at me, and just sauntered off. Like, all right,
Really?
yeah.
Wow.
So I had all these I have some pictures that I took, muddy paw prints all over the hood of the van, and
Oh
but
my
he just walked.
gosh.
He was a big bear though. He was a black bear, but he was not a baby bear. But I think he
Really?
probably just like along the river, it was really grown up like with brush and stuff, and there was only about a 4 foot path to get into the river. So I
Yeah.
think he probably just walked out of the river and was like, "Hey, what's this?"
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So he didn't seem too threatening, but we did leave that day. So I didn't want to be there and have him tell all of his bear friends,
Yeah. Yeah. Get
free
comfortable.
food.
Hey, I know where the
Yeah.
van is. Let's go get something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
So
I actually had another friend that had asked me, the same kind of question if you ever worried about those kinds of situations out there because your van is hard sided, right? So
right.
it's not easy for any kind of wildlife, but specifically a bear to get into. But they're pretty strong and powerful, and vans have those doors that are able to slide. So
Yeah.
my buddy Bob had said, they have the ability to get those things. They can pop them off the rails pretty quickly. So had you had any concerns about that? Do you do any kind of clearly if you had the bear, kind of looking up at the top of the van, you didn't have any kind of like perimeter kind of alert or anything going on. But is that something that
No.
you've done or worried about doing or?
No. Maybe I should. Maybe I'm just naive in thinking
Yeah,
it, but no. I mean, that's been like I said all last year. Last year I spent 2 months out in Montana and the like places where afterwards locals were like, "Whoa, you went out there by yourself?" And you think,
really?
"Okay,
Wow,
yeah,"
really?
and never even saw a bear. But I mean, yes, I am afraid of bears and have when I first started, like even as soon as Colorado, getting into Colorado when I first started my adventures, hiking in bear country is a completely different hike than when you're not, when you're walking around Arizona, don't have to worry about a bear jumping out of the sand. But but
Maybe
yeah,
a
like
Gila monster, but not a bear. Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, that's, I mean, you just kind of have to be aware. I don't go on any long hikes by ourselves when we're in, grizzly country and things like that. I stick to the roads, kind of
Really?
always have an idea of who's around. I have bear spray. Of course, that morning the bear was on my van. I thought, oh, my bear spray is in my backpack, which is under the bed in the back. So a lot of good that does. But
Yeah.
now it stays in the van. Um, but yeah, I mean, that's been my only
The only
issue,
major,
really.
yeah, and it sounded like
Yeah.
you handled it way better than I would have handled it.
I was surprised after it happened. I was like, why didn't I get scared by that?
You're kind of we've been friends for a long time. You're kind of a chill person anyway, but
Yeah.
I got to be honest with you. That's what worried me about you going out there because you're so relaxed and like, nothing's going to happen. It's going to
Yeah.
be great. But, like Bob was asking, going back in the backcountry, it's one of those, situations where, nobody really knows where you're at. Nobody knows what you're doing.
Right.
It's just you and your dog. And then, a lot of times bear situations come up because you've, walked upon or startled one, right? So,
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I try to be smart about it. If
yeah,
we're out walking and I see a fresh pile of bear scat, I turn around,
yeah, yeah,
'cause I'm
yeah.
not just, even if it's just been a few yards, I'm like, oh, that's it.
Peace
Time to
out.
go
I'm
back.
out of here.
Yeah. Or bear tracks,
Yeah,
It's funny because over the trip, I always send pictures of like bear traps or tracks and things to my parents, and my dad's like, that's too close. So the
yeah.
morning that it got on the van, I sent pictures of that, and I was like, do you think I got too close to this one?
Oh my God.
But yeah, I mean, I knock on wood.
Yeah,
I haven't been in any places where, I felt afraid. And I've really learned to trust my gut.
yeah.
If you get there have been many times we get places and, I
Just
get
doesn't
set
feel
up and
right.
I think, oh, this is great. And then just something, you're like, nope, let's go. And
Yeah,
so I don't even have to know what it is anymore.
Yeah, well, that's good.
But
Go with your gut. That's
yeah.
yeah. So I've got to ask you, how have your parents handled this entire situation? Especially
uh,
when I mean, I could just imagine me being your dad, you sending me that picture. I'd be like, "Where are you right now?" Right?
oh no, I think Dad would be right here with me in a heartbeat if he
Really
could. He every time I talk to them, they're on speakerphone, and Dad's got his atlas out, so he
tracking.
follows along. Yeah,
Yep.
and I think Mom's the one that's a little more nervous about me being out here, but I have it set up so she and my sister can follow me on Google Maps, so they
Okay.
can always see my little blue dot, um, which they check all the time. I learned, and and then I have a Garmin GPS
Yeah, I was
system,
going to ask you
and
about that. Yep.
so I went for the one of the more expensive ones. It's got the SOS, and I can also send text using the satellite phone option and
Yep.
that kind of stuff. So anytime I'm anywhere without a signal for a week or more, then I'll text them and say I'm alive, everything's cool.
Yeah.
you know.
Well, and
So
I meant to send you this episode. I listened to Tim Ferriss's podcast a lot, and one of the people that he interviewed, I think during the COVID period, was somebody that was a survivalist, and just how how technology and the ability to leverage the satellites can pretty much help people pinpoint where you're at.
yeah,
In the event that you needed to get assistance or aid, and it sounds like with the Garmin device that becomes a good backup and safety. Do you feel like now, because you kind of, I mean, you've always been on your own, right? So I mean, it's not like were checking in with your parents when you went to downtown Austin.
no.
But I mean, is there like, do you have a different sense of responsibility to tell your folks where you are going forward, or are you just kind of
Well,
like, hey, wherever I go, and I'll
yeah,
check in when I
it's just
check in.
yeah. I mean, I usually call them once a week and give them a rundown of what's happened and where we've been and all that. But like I said, they can see where I travel, and I get texts from my mom saying, "I see you're here, and
Yeah,
I
yeah,
see you had a lot of driving today," and
yeah.
so I know
That's
they're
good.
watching me. I don't need to
Yeah,
tell them where I'm at.
that's that's
So,
good.
yeah, which is
There,
fine. I mean, I'd
yeah,
rather them.
it's easier.
I always
It's
say,
checking in daily or something, right?
yeah, I always say, if my blue dot stays still too long,
Yeah,
then that's when you need to be worried. But
yeah, yeah. So
so
so some of these places, how often are you moving? Are you trying to stay a couple of days in these places just to get the full experience, or does it just go with, like you said,
it
your gut
just
feeling?
depends. Yeah. Sometimes you get to a place and you think you're going to stay there for a few days, and then it's just not as inviting as you wanted it to be, or there aren't as many walks, or you just kind of feel confined. I just kind of go with whatever. you know I usually hole up over the weekends. If I find a place over a weekend, I'll stay there, because that's usually when it's busier everywhere else and it's harder to find a place. So
Yeah.
usually just stay put, Friday through Sunday.
So
But
when you set off on this adventure and COVID happens,
right.
did that change any of your plans dramatically, or did you just like, hey, we're just going to roll with it and see what happens? Because I got to imagine some of the parks that I know that you had talked about visiting, those things had to have
Yeah.
closed, or you may not
Yeah.
have been able to get access. But what I was amazed on one of your posts about, the fact that the Bureau of Land Management, you can pretty much go anywhere on those lands. They're open range kind of thing. But was that where you stuck to most of your plan for? Was that always part of the plan, and was that influenced by
Yeah.
COVID in any way, or how did it
No,
affect your
that was
trip?
always yeah. I rarely pay for camping. It's all
Yeah.
just out on BLM, Bureau of Land Management
Yep.
land, or forest, United States forest lands. There are all sorts of apps, and I have different maps and, atlases, all that kind of stuff to get me into backcountry places. But yeah, no, the original plan was to be out on those properties anyway,
Yeah.
because it's free. Um, but when COVID hit, that got interesting, because I was in Utah at the time. Well, when it really got bad, like I was kind of watching it, and my water supply will last me about 2 weeks if I
Hmm.
stretch it. And and that's usually about the limit that you're allowed to stay in one place on these lands. They usually have a 14-day limit to hopefully not let people just set up their residency,
That
which
becomes the
which
home.
does happen.
Yeah, I
You'd be
imagine.
surprised. Um, but anyway, so I was kind of just stretching it out. But then, like Utah and Colorado, all those areas started shutting down the public lands, and so that's when it got real scary. It was scary for everybody because that was at the beginning, when everybody was freaking out. Nobody knew really what COVID was. And so my aunt and uncle have a house in New Mexico, and they were kind enough to open that up for Paco and I to quarantine there. And we ended up being there almost 2 months, I guess.
Oh, really? Okay.
And
I knew you were there for a period of time, but wow, 2 months.
Yeah, it was a little longer than I expected, but at the same time, stuff was still closed and public lands, and so I kind of waited, and I guess it was after Memorial Day then that I decided to hit the road, and have been on the road ever since.
Yeah,
but
that's awesome.
So yeah, the biggest thing that COVID did, I mean, obviously it shut things down. I didn't, go to museums or I did go to some national parks, but I didn't do a lot of the hiking if there were a lot of people, because, I don't want to get COVID. And but living in a van, I was just like, all right, you stay over there. I'll go hike out on my own in the forest. Yeah. But so we did a lot of just driving through some of the parks, which I know isn't the same, but I hope that we'll get to go back sometime. But on the other hand, like, I didn't realize, like, last year I went to Glacier, and it was wonderful, and we were in and out. Like, we spent like 4 days going in and out of Glacier, and it was great. And we'd have like entire picnic areas to ourselves. And this year I was up there, and it was horrible. I was just like, not gonna go. And then I was reading about it, and statistically they get like 3 million visitors a year.
Jeez.
And last year they only had 1.5, and I was like, no wonder.
Yeah,
it was so great.
Wonder. Yeah.
So last year, COVID made a lot of my camping experiences a lot better because, things weren't overrun. This year has just been nuts, with people just cramming into your spots and places. And it's been very different this year. But I think the biggest setback for me for COVID was it made it all a little more isolating than I intended, which, I know that did that for everybody because everyone's just stuck in their homes. But so I was grateful that I was out where I was.
Yeah.
But, I intended when I left to go sit in coffee shops because I like to talk to people and meet people. And but everything was closed, so it's like just kind of like supermarkets were my only social interaction, unless I met campers, which didn't happen that often, if I could speak. So, but it wasn't bad. It was all good. It's been a very introspective year, and which is great. So what's the most surprising thing that you've experienced thus far being on the road and living in a van? Let's see. The one thing that if those of you looking to be in a van or anywhere, getting used to seeing toilet paper and human feces all over the place.
Really?
No one warns you about that, and it's sad that it's become more. It's crazy. It's just every site. It's more rare to find a site that doesn't have a big pile of poop and toilet paper stuck to it than not.
That's horrible.
It is. It is. And it's just it's like, I don't know. I guess I have a reverence for nature that other people don't, because every time I see it, I just can't get my head around, like in rainforests, in beautiful places. It's like, what makes you think like, oh, I'll just leave this here? But I have trash pinchers, like grabbers, and so I'll pick them up. It's gross, but it's like, I'd rather do that than just have it out here and hope that if I clean it up, somebody else isn't going to come around and just think that it's a toilet,
Yeah. I mean, talk about a ripple you're doing for the world and the environment, right? And trying to make it a better experience for somebody else who comes on that, space.
Yeah. I mean, just the amount of trash, and I mean, the toilet paper is the worst part, because you're just like, come on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I get surprised every day though. I mean, just like that campsite that I posted pictures of with the blue water, that's one thing I've learned. I mean, I've learned a lot. I could probably write like some Buddhist book on things, lessons learned from the road, metaphors of life. But one thing I've learned that is a constant reminder and lesson is, like, the more I let go of trying to control where we're going, or exactly which campsite we're going to head to, or anything like that, then the more the universe kind of opens things up for me. And so, like that campsite I found the other day, like I said, I drive slowly, and so
Yeah.
I also pull over for people. So don't worry, I'm not that jerk that just stays in the lane. But I just pulled over into what I thought was a gravel pullout, and then I looked over and I was like, oh, this is a road. Let's go down this road,
Yeah.
and it led me to this campsite, and it's amazing. And so I
Well, and
think the
that's the
more
for
you
those
know,
those of you that are watching the video, that's the one that's in the top left, right, Lisa?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I heard the
Yes.
river when I camped or when I parked. I was like, oh, a river's there, and Paco loves water, so we kind of just parked, and then I thought I'll just walk down here and let him run around, and just stood up on it. There's a big bluff that is in another picture you can see that when we just looked down, and I was like, what? Like it was just,
That's awesome.
I just expected it to be another muddy river, but
Yeah. That picture
it
was.
was.
I mean, you've had amazing. I mean, your eye is phenomenal. And that's. I mean, that's the other thing we didn't touch on when we were talking about your art. But it's not just reconnecting on that level with the painting and the drawing. But I know you were pretty excited about what photos you would be able to to capture along the way. And I
Yeah.
just I tell you what, I'll go to your page and to your Instagram pretty often when I'm having like a bad day or stressed out because some of the stuff that I'm like, oh my God, you're so damn lucky to be out there.
Yeah.
But it's you have an amazing photographic eye as well. So
Thanks. Yeah. And I am very grateful for this opportunity. So I always feel bad that people are like, oh, because I get you're so lucky all the time. And I'm like, yes. And, I'm grateful every day. Like every day I wake up, and say thank you. And every
yeah,
campsite I tell, have a big long thank you ritual for it. And not like a ritual, but, it's like, I am lucky, and I'm grateful that I finally had the courage to do this,
yeah.
after thinking about it for so long. And it's like, why not?
Well, I mean,
So
I mean, I think a lot of people are living vicariously through you because you're kind of a living testament of somebody who said they were going to do something and you've done it, and it takes a massive amounts of courage to do what you're doing, right? And
yeah,
I think that, I mean, even since you and I talked about it, I started following several people that are living their life out of their vehicles or vans, and or living life on the road. And,
hmm
especially, yeah. And I think COVID actually, if anything positive came out of COVID, it's the fact that there are a lot of job opportunities and a lot of flexibility with some of the situation that was thrust upon us that, you can still work from different environments, right? And
right,
you just have to find, like you did today, find Wi-Fi and maybe check in, or maybe you can do a freelance job, or you work, on your side hustle or whatever. But nobody is necessarily now bound to their home or to their office.
yeah,
Not all jobs are that way, but at the end of the day, I know you had said, look, if I really get bored, or I decide, I want to earn a few extra dollars or something, you've got these skill sets that allow you to be more of a freelancer and, make money and when you want to make it, and spend the rest of
right,
your time living your life, which is pretty fantastic.
yeah. And van life, like I originally set out, and this was kind of in my last website post. Originally I kind of gave myself a year, which I
Mm-hmm.
think was more of just a safety parachute for
Sure.
myself in case it failed, and that way I wouldn't feel like a failure, or in case I didn't like it as much as I, thought I might. But now I'm just out here, and it's so much cheaper than what I thought it would be. I'd kind of set aside money to get me through, and I still have a lot. I mean, so
Yep.
it's amazing how many people I've met who think I'm on unemployment. I'm like, no,
No,
it's
no.
like you can try to, throw me under the bus on that one, but nope,
Right.
not
Yeah,
not
you
milking it.
planned it correctly. I
But
mean, and you were smart about it on the
yeah,
front end, and you've been smart about it ever since. And so I think that's phenomenal. I know one of the other questions that I had written down was, one of the things I know you mentioned in our original interview, which, by the way, you are the first person to ever come back to the Ripple Effect podcast, and
all
you're the only
right.
person I've invited back to the Ripple Effect podcast. There
Nice.
was so much interest on your episode, and so many of my guests since we did that one have come back and were like, I really want to follow, or what have you heard from Lisa? I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm your
Oh,
unofficial
that's great.
Austin ambassador for a lot of people. They're like,
Hey,
hey, have you
well,
talked
you're
to
a
Lisa
good
lately?
person to be that. So,
I don't know about that, but I at any rate, I mean, it's kind of interesting, in terms of the approach that you've taken and what you were doing. But one of the goals I know that you had mentioned early on when you first started telling me about this was the plan was kind of the stories that you wanted to collect along the way from all the people
Yeah.
that you meet. I'm sure COVID kind of changed that a little bit, but have you
Hmm.
been able to experience that in a little bit more?
This year, last
Yeah.
year, not so much. But like I said, last year was, I don't, if you need some therapy, I suggest go on a road trip. And it's by no means what I anticipated or expected when I started this, but it's amazing what driving, because my van's pretty loud inside. It's an old
Uh-huh.
van, and then, it's got cavernous in here. So I can't really listen to anything while I drive. I have like a 400 song Spotify playlist that I know every song by heart. So I can listen to that if I need. But so, most of the time I'm driving in silence. And then when I'm out in nature, I do a lot of walking, and that's just silence. But you kind of dive deep into yourself. And,
Sure.
which has been wonderful because I have unearthed all sorts of things that I thought I had long buried, and thought that I was too grown up for. And it's amazing what, somebody said to you in second grade and still sticks to you.
Yeah.
And then you build your entire life identity based on what somebody else said to you. And once you kind of start peeling that back, it's like, oh, that's not who I am at all. And
Yeah.
so that's been really refreshing. So I think a lot of people in COVID quarantine kind of went through that, maybe not as easily as I did, but
Yeah.
we were all kind of forced to be a little more introspective and more grateful for what we do have. Um, but last year it was more about, I was thinking about the stories too, and I think about that while I'm out, and it's more been the stories of the environment and
Yeah.
the areas that I visit. And but this year, now that things are open, yes, I can sit and chat with people, and it's great. And I've had a lot of just like 5-minute conversations with people, and
Yeah.
you learn a lot about them and everything except their name, and then you leave, and I'm never, it's like I'll never see them again. And that was a little that kind of got to me last year because
Yeah.
me, I like to talk to
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so last year it was just like these really superficial kind of just surface level conversations, and then you leave, and some of them you're like, good riddance, that was great. And then some you just kind of leave with that longing of wanting to talk more or get to know them more, but just don't have that opportunity. But
Are any
so
of these folks that you've encountered like anybody that you've kind of run into more than once, like, or anybody that
no.
you actually have exchanged information so you can stay in touch and maybe they're going a different direction, they're on a different path, but there might be an opportunity to exchange an email about their adventure and, share some of
Yeah,
yours or
well, last year I met some van lifers, the ones that did the video of me, of
yeah,
the
yeah,
tour of my van.
yeah,
I still keep in touch with them and some others that I met in that same time frame. And I learned then that van lifers give out stickers with their like social media handles on there, like
hmm
business cards. And so now I have those. So now
nice,
it's a lot easier to, say that, because otherwise it's like, hey, I'm Lisa, you want to put my information in your phone that we don't have signal? And it's
yeah,
just kind of
yeah,
weird. So
just
now I
get
can
yeah,
just say like, here's my sticker, follow me on the socials. And so now that I've been doing that, yes, we've been connecting with a lot more people, which has been nice.
yeah,
So, but yeah, it is interesting. I mean, it's interesting to like I just met a woman yesterday who's been living in a van for a year and a half also, and we had a lot of similar stories. And so it's nice when you meet somebody who you kind of gel with.
yeah, absolutely.
So
Well, so one of the other questions I had for you was, we talked about, what surprised you, but, what was, you know, what was the one thing that you realized that just defied your expectations? I would say probably that you thought it'd be great, but man, once you got out there, it was like, holy crap! I'm so glad I did this.
oh, I mean, it's so hard to pick just one. I
Sure.
mean,
Well, I
it's
mean,
amazing.
give me a couple.
Yeah, well, I mean, let me think. I should have given thought to some of these questions that I would have known you would ask. Um, it's just, I guess that maybe I'm just an emotional person, but
Yeah.
there are so many times that either while driving or hiking, and you just come across, like I remember last year in Wyoming, I'd never been to Wyoming, and I was kind of going through the not so exciting parts of Wyoming,
hmm
and then like we made this bend and it just opened up to this, I mean, most amazing landscape, and you just feel that emotion, just like
Yeah.
leap into your throat and get, stinging eyes. And so I have a lot of those moments
Yeah.
where it's just like some, deep-seated genetic emotion jumps into, you know.
Yeah.
So it's just that, like, I'm easily awed by all of that, and it's so I don't know. There are so many that, like, Glacier National Park was amazing. It's everything that, you know, it's more than I expected. That was great. And Olympic National Park that I just went through up here is also amazing. I
Yeah.
highly recommend that. Um, we don't do a lot in national parks because Paco's not allowed on the trails, and
Yeah.
so
Okay.
we tend to do, I tend to do bigger hikes outside of the parks.
Yeah.
So I haven't done any of those big epic ones. But I mean, it's hard. I could see a tree that could move me and stick with me, and I feel connected to, and that's like there's so many different things that have stuck with me and exceeded all expectations.
Well, that's cool. I mean, I was hoping you'd say that. I knew it would be the case because you're such a thoughtful and intentional person. I've always loved that about you. I mean, you're just one of the I mean, you're just amazing on every level. But I could see you being out there, and like when you were talking about, well, just looking at the sun coming through the trees, I can see you just sitting there, just in total, you know,
Yeah,
happiness, because that is something that most of us don't get the opportunity to take the time to actually recognize or appreciate.
yeah,
The sun coming through through the branches, or the sound of the wind blowing through the trees. And in our lives, we generally are so fast paced and so
hmm
on to the next thing that we often don't ever have the opportunity to take that pause and look. And so it is like, I know myself and several people mentioned how envious they are of what you're doing, because this is something that you can continue to do for as long as you want to, and as long as you're comfortable doing it, right? But
yeah,
at the end of the day, you don't have the day-to-day pressures that I think that a lot of us feel. You're able to make your own life and do it at your own pace, which is just, it sounds like magic. I mean,
yeah,
honestly.
yeah. Well, and that's another thing I'm grateful for. One thing the people I have met along the way, and this was in my last blog post too, was I've heard so many stories of people who just lost a loved one, or I have lost friends, or old colleagues that were my age, or not that much older, and it's like life's too short.
Yeah.
That's kind of the when I took the jump. It's like, if I don't do it now, I'm going to be in this hamster wheel and in some way, shape, or form, for the rest of my life. And I've met so many people who are like, I can't wait to retire and do what you're doing. And it's like, well, why wait?
Why
Like, if
wait?
if
Yeah.
you're to a point, and then I've met retired people who are out in these gigantic RVs, and but now, they can't go on the long hikes, or they can't do the things that they had always dreamed of doing when they retired. And so it's
Yeah.
kind of, and and sometimes I feel a little guilty when they're talking to me, but I've learned to not own that. But at the same time, it's like, I feel like I'm taking, it's not a midlife crisis, but like midlife retirement.
Yeah.
It's like I have the rest of my life to work, and my priorities have shifted so greatly. Like, I do not want to work in an office again. I just,
Yeah.
like, my
Nope.
expenses are like, I was able to sell my house and pay off all my debts. So now it's like, I would be happy to paint and sell my paintings. And if I need to get a part-time job, like, do that somewhere,
But you can do it on
I,
your own terms and in your own way, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I've learned now that, trying to strive for a bit bigger and better job doesn't define who I am.
Yeah.
And for those who want to make this jump, it took me a good 6 months to get out of that. Like, I have to be doing something. I have to do this. I have to, and like making a checklist, and, feeling like if I was just sitting somewhere that I was wasting my time. And now I'm just like, yeah, I just sit and read a book all day and be happy as a clam.
Yeah.
And, I've
Yeah.
read more books in the past year and a half than I have in the past 10 years,
That's
probably.
awesome. That's
Yeah, it's
awesome.
great. I use all the little free libraries
Yeah.
around, those little free lending libraries.
Yeah.
So I read things that I would never have picked up before, but I'm like, you find some gems.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's
So
that sounds like absolute heaven to me.
yeah.
I'm reading a book now called How to Do Nothing,
Oh yeah.
and they talk about the fact that because the boundaries of the work environment have shifted so much that the possibility of actually allowing yourself the freedom to do more, and it's written from the perspective I think the lady's name, I know her last name is Odell. I think it's Jessica Odell. I don't have it up right now, but she's a professor out in Stanford, and she teaches art at
Mm,
one of the most prestigious universities. Right, that's very hard
yeah.
charging, very high tech, oriented, being out in the valley. And she was talking about the concept from an artist perspective, why the importance of observing and watching. And you might like the book because she talks about how she just found open nature and space being like that was her recharge zone, right? Which is
Mm,
very much what you're experiencing. But the simple fact of watching birds and doing bird watching and hearing the different connotations of their whistling or their singing, right? Is something that brings her great joy, and she never had paid attention to it. But she was talking about how ultimately we are all working so hard towards something, and most of us are trying to get that next job or make more money or get the bigger house or whatever. And when you get that, that doesn't actually bring you happiness, right? But
right.
finding a way to be at peace with yourself and enjoy the here and now in the moment, and finding that whatever that hook is for you has
Hmm.
such a huge value to an individual's life. And she was talking about being an art teacher in a tech oriented college and how challenging it was for those folks that are coming in. These young people are like, look, I don't even want art. I don't want art appreciation,
Yeah.
art history. I don't need any of it. And how her great passion is helping them understand, well, tapping into that side of your brain, that creative, that innovative side really does have application for other things you're going to do out there in the world. And you're kind of proof of that, right? You were a phenomenal artist beforehand, but I have no doubt that what comes of this experience is going to be a completely different, approach to what you
Yeah.
have done. I mean, you're going to be very successful at anything and everything you do. At some point, I guarantee you, you won't need a part-time job. You'll be in demand for all the art that you do. But I
That's my
can
hope.
see it I could just see it in your eyes that
Yeah.
is like in full tilt, right?
Yeah. Especially right now. That's what, like, yeah, that would be my dream is if I could just paint. And especially now that I've kind of detached from all the, false ideals and beliefs that I had attached to
Hmm.
myself as an artist in the past and what I thought it meant to be a successful artist. And now I'm just like, now I just want to get it out there and
I love it.
go. So,
Well, two final questions I have for you, and then I
all right.
probably should let you go because I know you are, you probably have some amazing hikes planned this afternoon or something. But
uh,
what do you do about the winter? Are you out there in the winter, or do you take a break and come back to civilization for any period of time, or are you planning on just kind of? Did you do last winter kind of out on the road and head
yeah.
back?
So last year, I spent winter, I kind of moved with the weather.
Uh
And
huh.
so last year I spent most of the winter in like southeastern California in the Mojave Desert down there. It's beautiful.
Really?
And and then Arizona, kind of went all over Arizona and then over into New Mexico a little bit. I kept running into snow. Anywhere there was snow, I'd go away from. I got caught 8 degrees was the coldest I had, and I was like, okay, it's time to get out of here. So 30s are fine. I stay because inside the van, I have window coverings that keep it insulated. So, without those, it usually stays about 10 degrees warmer. With those, it's usually about 15, 20 degrees warmer inside the van at night. Um, and I have a little heater, but obviously I can't leave that on all
Yeah.
night. But I have, a wool blanket, all sorts of stuff. You just learn to adapt. But most of the winter I spent in Arizona, and with COVID, I wasn't able to go home for Christmas, so that kind of holidays were a little strange.
Yeah.
I did rent an Airbnb on Thanksgiving so I could cook myself a little meal and do
Nice.
that kind of stuff, but that was the only time I'd done that. But no, I mean, finally, I was able to finally go back to my parents' house just this past May and stayed there for a couple weeks, and that was the longest I'd been in a house, you know.
Did it seem
And
weird after you've been
it
on the
did.
road for so long?
Well, I mean, it was my home where I grew
Yeah.
up, so not too weird. But I still had after a couple of weeks, you're like, all right, I want to be back in my bed. I want to get back in there. And I have a cousin just east of Seattle, and I just spent a week with her. And so, it's like, it's nice to be able to connect with all these people around, but still, it's not. I also like being in the van, moving
Yeah.
around. But
Well, I guess one other question I forgot to ask you, because you talked about, temperature and, staying warm in the cold, in the cold months.
mhm.
Another friend of mine named Lisa had asked, are you using like solar power with your van? Do you have any of that?
Mhm.
Is that what you do to keep power going, or how do you keep it?
Yeah, I have a solar panel on the top.
Okay.
I only have a 160 watt, but the only thing I have attached to it is a fridge.
Okay.
So um, everything else, like my lighting's just battery, little LEDs. Um, but yeah, so solar's great. It's funny being out on the road now. I'm like, if I ever did go back to living in a house, like I'm gonna have solar. Like I'm gonna
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
total like off grid, but not in the like conspiracy sort of way, but in the eco-friendly sort of off grid way. Because it's so amazing how much solar, it just functions so well. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's all. You know, there are only a time. It's my main battery will charge up my alternative or whatever alternate battery,
Yeah.
um, auxiliary battery. That's the word
Yeah.
I was looking for. While I drive, and so there have only been a few times where either when snow was piled on the top of my solar panel, or like here in Washington where it's gray all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'll have to like fire up the van and let it run for a little bit to charge up the battery. But on these really hot days that we've had, when the smoke too, the wildfire smoke
Hmm.
really will offset it. But those days I was fine with it because then I just blast the AC and sit inside the van for
It's
a while. So, but yeah,
well.
it's worked great for me. So
Does the upcoming travel agenda have you coming anywhere near Austin anytime soon?
I'm hoping to get down there in December. Is
Okay.
kind of my plan, so that I can be back. My family's in Oklahoma, so
Yeah.
the plan is, knock on wood. I hope COVID doesn't detour that again. But
Yeah, me
if
too.
if if things are still as they are now, then December is kind of first part of December is my plan to go through Austin. So
Sweet.
I will let
Well,
everyone know.
you better, and
I will.
I will have a cold beer waiting for you.
Sounds
So
good.
how about some cold beer and queso?
Definitely. Sounds
Well, I
delicious.
appreciate you coming back on the Ripple Effect podcast. Like I
Yeah.
said, I mean, you have a following from my Ripplers. People are so enamored with what you're doing, and your adventure, and I'm just I'm envious of everything that you're experiencing, and
Thanks.
certainly it has me thinking about where I want to go and what I want to do at some point in the near future, because I feel like I'm being left out of some amazing, amazing stuff out there.
There's so
It's
much to
it,
see.
there is, yeah, and I know there's more for you to go see and experience and do, and I can't wait to keep
Yeah.
up with the next set of adventures. Just so everybody, just for one more, just real quick plug, just let everybody know how they can keep up with you one more time.
My website is just lisabussett.com. And I guess Steve will probably put a link to
Yep,
that.
right
So
here. Yep,
you
and we'll
can
do that.
get the spelling and all that. All of my social media handles are just my name, Lisa Bussett. So you can find me on Instagram. Like I said, that's where I'm most active. Or Facebook, Twitter. I don't usually anymore because the app fell off my phone somehow, so I don't even use it. But I still have an account there if you want to follow me there.
Yeah,
And you can also email me. I've gotten a lot of emails along the way from a lot of women, which is
yeah,
great, and
yeah,
women have a lot of more, female focused questions, which is I'm happy to answer,
yeah.
and so happy to answer anybody's questions. So, because if I can be that inspiration for someone, then I'm happy to help.
Yeah, yeah, well,
So,
you are for me for sure, and you are for a lot of people, and I am so grateful to be connected to you and live
thanks.
vicariously through through your life, your lens, and your paint.
Yeah,
So I can't wait to see you in December. Until then, stay safe, and if you need
thank
anything, as always, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm one of your biggest fans, and so
you.
grateful for our friendship. So.
Yeah, same.
All right. Well,
It's been
thanks again
fun.
for joining the Ripple Effect podcast. You take care, and as always, ripple on.
Bye.